talk with you today about my life and my thoughts about things, and some information about what I believe. You know, I entered the startup world never having, of course, started a company before, as most people do. I never even really thought about doing a startup because I got out of business school at Stanford in 1978, and it was not the popular thing to do to join a startup at that time. So I thought that I would go to work for a company in charge of international business development, and I did that with a manufacturing company in Southern California. And I lived in Newport Beach, which was a beautiful place to live in those days, 1978. And I ended up traveling back to the Bay Area, the San Francisco Bay Area, to visit classmates, friends of mine that were still there. One of whom was at Apple Computer. He had joined Apple in its second year, just after we graduated from Stanford Business School. And when I saw the power of a home computer as expressed by the Apple II using a spreadsheet, which is called VisiCalc, it struck me then that I was in the wrong industry. I was in healthcare, manufacturing of instruments, and I realized that the home computer, with its power, had the potential to change the entire world. So my decision was to leave my job in Southern California, where I was the vice president of international business development, and move back to the San Francisco Bay Area, where there were beginning to be startup companies in the computer industry. And that's where I decided I wanted to find a position. I ended up working at Atari as they were just starting to develop their home computer business for Europe and the Middle East. And I did that for a couple of years, during which time I retained my relationships with classmates from the Stanford Business School and undergraduate school, because I had attended Stanford as an undergraduate as well. And in 1982, I received a call from Trip Hawkins, who was a classmate of mine at the Stanford Business School, and he said to me, "Now, Jeff, if you were going to start a company in this industry, would it be a hardware company or a software company?" And I said, definitely a software company, because I had seen what it takes to design and approve and get a piece of hardware built. And it was a multi-year process. It was very expensive. And by the time you brought that piece of hardware to the market, there was another product that was already available that was maybe had some features that you wish you could have designed into your piece of hardware, but it was too late to do it. So you were already kind of behind when you released your product, and you'd have to start the whole process of design again, and it would take years. Whereas I saw software as a process of development at Atari at that time, for the games that Atari was producing, as a fairly short development time. And within a year, usually, the programmers could churn out a piece of software that could be a very successful game. And so my inclination was, if I were to start a company in the computer industry, it would be a software company. And at that time, Tripp said, that's exactly where my thought is, and I will, let's talk later. Of 1982, he invited me and four other people to his home for dinner, and we spent an evening together. I knew 3 of the people of the 6 that were there, and I had just met the other 3, and we spent an evening together talking about the kind of company we would like to be a part of, how we would want to have it feel, what we would each want to do in the company, and we were the premise of the company we were talking about creating was a software publishing company. There were a few of those in the Bay Area at the time, but there really was no gaming software publishing company. And so that was the focus of our discussion. But really more importantly, we were getting to know each other and trying to understand how we could relate to each other and what our skills were and what kind of resources we could be for each other. I was focused on the international business side of things, and at that time, 1982, the world was not as small as it has gotten since, and so it was unusual to have somebody in a group of a startup team who was focused on a worldwide market, a worldwide sales, worldwide distribution. But I was convinced that was the way the world was heading, and that we, in order to be successful, we needed to have at least the awareness of the fact that the whole world market was going to be open to us at some point in the near future, and we needed to prepare for that. So in August of 1982, I received a call from Tripp saying, "Are you ready to leave your job at Atari and become a founder of a new software company, publisher, like we spoke about it at dinner?" And my reaction was that I couldn't afford not to do it. I had been so impressed with the group of 6 people that had been drawn together for the discussion of starting a company. I was impressed with their intelligence and their personalities and their communication skills. I just felt like we had made some kind of connection at that time, and I felt like because they were virtually all of them were Stanford Business School graduates, as I was, I felt like we had a lot in common, and I couldn't say no. So I left my job at Atari, and the first week or two that we started working on this new company, which didn't have a name at the time. We were in the offices. We had office space in Sequoia Capital's offices. Don Valentine had an extra conference room in his office space, and he let us use that until we were able to find office space for ourselves. And so we were there for a couple of weeks, and after that, we acquired some office space and moved into a building in Burlingame, California. And so that was my first introduction to becoming a part of a startup. And as a matter of fact, all 6 of us, it was our first time to do a startup. It was actually probably a fairly common story as I look back on it now. At that same time, Sun Microsystems was just getting started. As I say, Apple was about 6 years old. We'd been out of business school. 3 of us that were together at Electronic Arts had been out of business school for about 4 years. And it was just an exciting time, but a time when not many new software companies, certainly no publishers, were being created. So it gave us a good opportunity to make a presentation to the investment community at the time that was somewhat unusual. We didn't have any products. We just had an excellently written business plan, a good idea, and backgrounds that I think made the venture community all believe that we had great potential for our company. At Electronic Arts, as we were going through the trials and tribulations of a startup, there were lots of crazy stories that happened. I think that the one now in retrospect that is, to me, one of the most interesting is the manner in which one of the most famous taglines in any consumer product in the world which is EA Sports, it's in the game. How did that tagline get created? It's a story that nobody really has heard before, and it actually occurred after I had left the company, when we were a public company and maybe doing $1 billion, maybe not quite that much, but close to $1 billion in revenues. So we were a successful, large corporation when the decision to break away, or not break away, but create an EA Sports division was made. And Don Transiff, who had really been the producer inside the company that had gotten the sports product line moving, he and his team decided they needed a tagline to accompany the new division they were creating, which they were going to call EA Sports. And so they spent a few weeks talking among themselves, brainstorming about what kind of phrase they wanted to use and associate with the new division of Electronic Arts. And they came up to the day that they were going to make their final decision and implement all of the peripheral arrangements that needed to be done in order to employ this new tagline for EA Sports. And the night before, well, the day before that decision, the day of the decision, there was one of his employees named Jeff Odiorn, who was a brilliant guy at Electronic Arts at the time, working with Don Transiff. He was taking a shower in the morning of the day that they were going to make their decision. The tagline that was the leading candidate for use was the spitting image of sports. That's what everyone had kind of agreed was probably going to be the best tagline for EA Sports. And in the shower, Jeff Odiorn had a brainstorm, and it came to him that this tagline should actually be EA Sports, it's in the game. And he was it really excited him, and he was so convinced of that when he got to the office that morning and they started the meeting, he stood up and said, you know, I hate to say this at the last minute, but I think I have a much better tagline than I thought of in the shower this morning. And he delivered that. And Don Transiff, who was the leader of the group, was smart enough and flexible enough and open enough to, first of all, recognize that it was actually a much better tagline for the division of Electronic Arts. And he had the power, even in a company with as much organizational diversity and size that it was at that time. He could make that kind of decision at the last minute. And so he did. And I think everybody in the room agreed that it was a much better tagline than the spitting image of sports. And to me, it's very interesting because everywhere I go now in the world, everybody that I ever mentioned Electronic Arts to has heard the tagline or will repeat the tagline, EA Sports, it's in the game, even if they don't speak English. Whether it's a taxi driver or a doorman at a hotel, if they know that I'm associated with Electronic Arts, they deliver that tagline to me. And so it's a really powerful marketing genius, but something that you wouldn't know about.